Well, if I'm not thinking of the geography of it, I would say the coordination that went on to make that place happen. The fact that the Task Force Delta was greater than the sum of its parts. If there were any weak links, it was not intentional. It was almost insurmountable odds for them to do it. But it wasn't just people that fixed airplanes and people that flew airplanes. It was security guard. It was think about the logistics of feeding 22 or 2,800 Marines every day. Think about the fact that fuel for MoGas, for generators, and then for airplanes. And I read in one of the command chronologies that between June of 72 and June of 73, we pumped 30 million gallons of jet fuel through those airplanes. When we first went down, our assignment was to provide direct air support and close air support to the South Vietnamese Marines and soldiers, because the North Vietnamese had overrun Quang Tri, and for the first time in the war, and the war had gone on for many years, the war in the South had always been a guerrilla war. And in March of 1972, they sent 3 full divisions, heavily armored with tanks and artillery, and later put in surface-to-air missiles across the DMZ and into the Quang Tri area.
And this was the Easter Offensive?
Correct.
Yes?
Yes. And there was also 3 divisions in the second MR2. MR1 is the north part, MR2, and in MR3. They had 3 full divisions in each one of those, and a full supply chain coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And our job was to do everything we could to help the South Vietnamese overcome that threat, to retake Quang Tri, and to destroy their supply lines on the Ho Chi Minh Trail over in Laos. We also, I'll just go back to your question that we were just talking about, we also, in July, took on the task of being on a BARCAP, which is Barrier Air Combat Patrol. And we flew up north when linebacker operations were going on. The Air Force and Navy were dropping bombs on dams and power plants and that sort of thing. And they had aerial refuelers in the northern half of Vietnam, and of course air refuelers are not combat aircraft, so our job was a barrier to prevent MiGs from coming in and shooting down those air refueling airplanes, and also to help any aircraft that might have gotten separated or that were in trouble trying to get out of North Vietnam. If they were being chased, our job was to go after the MiGs. So it was twofold. It was direct air support, which is higher altitude bombing, close air support, which was lower level, where you have bad guys and good guys in contact, and you don't want to kill the good guys, but you got to get the bad guys. And then we had the BARCAP. Now, to answer your question, when I first got there, we flew usually 1 sortie a day, but that didn't last very long. We started doing what we call Da Nang turns. And so we had a ground crew over in Da Nang in Vietnam, and their job was to, what we would do is we would take off from Nam Phuong, about 50 miles or so to the east of Nam Phuong. We would aerial refuel, so we could get on station with as much fuel as possible while we wait for whatever target we're going to get. After our first mission, after the first time we dropped all of our bombs, we would not go back to Nam Phuong, we would go to Da Nang. We landed at Da Nang, and the ground crews that we had there would rearm and refuel our aircraft. And then we would fly another mission from Da Nang to another target area, and then fly back to Nam Phuong. So that was 2 missions a day. 1 airplane, or 2 airplanes, or 5 airplanes could attack 1 target or 2 targets on every one of those missions. So you double the number of missions you do. Obviously, you flew more. You know, a typical mission was somewhere around 1.5 hours. Sometimes not quite as long as that, sometimes a little longer, based on fuel. And then, if you're out of armament, there's no sense in hanging around. You got to go get gas or go home. But in this case, we would go to Da Nang, and they would put more bombs on our airplane, fill them up, and we would take off and go attack another target. And if I can just go as an aside, on the 20th of June, when I went to Nam Phuong from Da Nang, I went up and I have a notebook that shows what I did on this day. I had never been to Nampong. I wasn't exactly sure where it was other than from looking at aerial maps. But I took off I had a wingman, and we went up to Quang Tri, and we took out 2 trucks with ammunition in them, and then we flew over to Nampong and landed. So I had a mission on my way to the first time I ever got to Nampong. Generally speaking, at the end of that day, where you've flown 2 missions, the airplanes go to bed for the night. And so the crews that are in Nampong are repairing any battle damage if you had it. But there's, those kinds of airplanes have mechanical issues very frequently, and they have to be fixed. Maybe a generator is acting up, and they've got to work on that. Or in the F4, we had a radar system, and the radar was very finicky, and it took a lot of parts, and it would go down, and they'd have to get it back up. So it was repair and maintenance, and then refuel it, and they refueled them as soon as they got back. So if it was necessary to go out again, they could. And then what would happen is we would get, the air group would get an order from the 7th Air Force and the 1st Marine Air Wing to say, these are the kinds of missions we want you to fly tomorrow. And with that, they would then determine what loads of bombs, what types of bombs would be on the airplane. And so once we were, they call that a fragmentation order. Once we were fragged, then they knew what kind of bombs to put on the airplane. So first thing in the morning, we were ready to go again and do it all over again. Well, the only time we did air-to-air was on the Barcap, because that was up north. The MiGs never really came south. I don't believe that there was ever a complete engagement with the Nampong airplanes, air-to-air, but I personally had, and I'll have to explain this, there's a guided missile frigate off the coast of North Vietnam, and it's an air traffic control machine, basically, even though they have missiles. And the call sign is Red Crown. And Red Crown had radars that went all across North Vietnam, and they could tell when airplanes took off from a runway. And they could tell which direction it was going. And so...
the north?
In the north, yeah.
They could tell this?
Yeah, from the ship. Because of the, it's just like FAA now today can look at an airplane and say, he's here, and now he's over here. So they would tell us where the MiGs were headed, what direction they were going. So in my case, I was up there with a wingman, and we were on the Barcap, which was a kind of a racetrack pattern that we flew at around 15 to 20,000 feet. And we were there to get information, and if a MiG was coming our way or was going towards the tankers, we would be directed by Red Crown. We would be given a direction to fly to go intercept those MiGs. So one of the things that they did to identify where the MiGs were, Red Crown would call, they would make a transmission so everybody knew that there were MiGs airborne and where they were. And to pinpoint them, they called the city of Hanoi Bullseye. And they would make a call, and they say, bandits, bandits, bullseye, 120 at 60. Meaning that from Hanoi, on a radial of 160 degrees at 60 miles, that's where those bad guys were. And so then we would know where we were, and we would know where we were in relation to them. So at one point, Red Crown is telling us that they are out in front of us, and we're leaving the direction of the Barcap going towards the east coast, my airplane and the airplane next to me. And these blue bandits, the color was the type of aircraft. Blue Bandit was a MiG-21. And they turned towards us, and so we're doing this, head on, and neither of the radars in our airplanes could see them. My Rios were working everything they could, but they couldn't pick them up. And there was, Red Crown would say, okay, MiGs on your nose now, 30 miles. On your nose at 20. On your nose at 10. Merged plot, meaning they couldn't break out the MiGs from the American airplanes. Fortunately, we were at 15,000 feet below an overcast, and they were at some altitude above the overcast, and so they didn't see us and we didn't see them, and we went like this. I can't remember the town, but we were probably 100 miles south of Da Nang, right on the Laotian border, and we were making multiple runs. We would drop sometimes two bombs at a time, so we'd make 6 runs. because you could be more accurate and you didn't use all your bombs in one spot. You could have different targets. And we were taking heavy ground fire, and by the heavy ground fire, they all had 51 caliber machine guns. That's not heavy, but then they also had ZU-23s, which were 23 millimeter radar guided guns, and then you could see tracers going past the canopy. And so I pulled off from a run, having dropped my last 2 bombs, and all of a sudden the airplane shook and shuddered and rolled upside down violently, and I thought I'd been hit. And I got the airplane back under control, right side up, and it was flying in a yaw, and I looked down and my left engine was gone. Not gone, but not running. So I told the forward air controller, I said, I think we've been hit. Give me a vector to a place where I can eject safely and somebody can come pick me up. So he told me the direction to go. And then I realized that the airplane was flying, it was not on fire, and the right engine, which was still good, was working. So I told him, I said, we're going to make our way back to Da Nang. And so we turned and went north, and we landed at Da Nang, and when we got in, it turns out, and this is the only time this ever happened to me in all the years I flew, the airplane was not hit. There was not a bullet hole in it. It was a mechanical failure, but however it happened, the engine seized. Normally, when you lose an engine, it windmills because you've got air going through the ducts, the intake ducts. So the engine just windmills, but it's not producing thrust. It's just spinning from the air. But in this case, the engine froze up, and so the fact that it rolled upside down was the torque from the engine seizing. And so when we got back, I probably could have messed my pants, but we made it, and I got 2 single mission air medals. Both of them were in situations where we had bad weather, we had to change the direction of our attack, and we pressed attack even though we were taking really heavy ground fire, and the enemy backed off. And in both cases, that's what that was for. And both of them were early on. They were, I think, in June or late June, I think, 72, very close together. In fact, my air medal missions says air medal with a gold star for the first award, and the second one says air medal with a gold star for the first award. They were so close together, they processed, even though they were 2 different missions. We did amazing things in a very short period of time. The Seabees got there, started the construction of the tents on the 24th of May, 1972. And I don't know what the total number was when they were finished, but they left in October. I think it was the 12th of October. So in that short period of time, they put up hundreds of tents. And you'll see them tomorrow when I talk. I got some slides of the sawmills that the Seabees had, where they're cutting the 2x4s and 2x6s to make the tents. The other thing that stands out is that we did a lot with nothing. When we first got there wasn't even enough water every day, potable. We didn't have potable water. They had some, they brought water buffaloes in, but we were drinking Singhai beer. Because it's a good alternative, but we didn't have enough water. We had no showers, and so we would just go out, but the tents had awnings, and the awnings would catch water. So you just take your clothes off, go out, you push up on the awning, the water done, you soak yourself down, you push this awning up again, the soap comes down, or the water comes down and rinses you off. And no flush toilets, no electricity. We ate I don't know how long, I want to say probably 4 to 6 weeks, we ate sea rations. We had no mess hall.
Did you lose weight?
Huh?
Did you lose weight?
Yeah, I got down to 140 pounds. So what stands out is that we did, and we, from what I've read, from things I've heard, like the Jim Martis note, we flew more, MAG-15 flew more sorties than any other units of any of the Air Force or the Navy in South Vietnam over the same period of time. I was on the BARCAP one time, and there was a bunch of Navy guys on a strike, and one of the Navy guys got shot down. And I don't know if it was a 2-man plane or it was A7, it was a single guy, but he was on the ground. And so the way that would work is the senior guy in the flight, if one of your men went down, you're the SAR commander. You're in charge of trying to get that guy out of there. So the Navy guy is the SAR commander, the guy that was with the airplane that got shot down. And one of the things they always want to do is they want to identify that the person that is on the ground and talking to you is really the guy that you want him to be, that it's not some Vietnamese who speaks English very well. And so the Navy guy off the ship said to the guy on the ground, he said, okay, so who won the Rams Raiders game last weekend? And the guy says, oh God, man, I don't watch that crap. I don't know who did it. Just get me out of here. And then the on-scene commander is getting low on fuel, and we're there to protect the Jolly Greens when they come in, and we're orbiting the area. So we go back up the next morning. I'm back on the same SARCAP. SAR is Search and Rescue Combat Air Patrol, SARCAP. And now the same Navy guy that's talking to him yesterday is talking to him, and the guy on the ground says, you got to get me out of here. You got to get me out of here. And the SARCAP guy says, hey, you're whispering. What's the matter? Is the enemy close? And the guy on the ground says, why? Do you want to talk to one of them?